Hi, this is Dave from Notes and Volts. Sometimes I get requests for projects that are a little out of the norm for this channel. I thought it would be a good idea to just start capturing them on video for people who are interested in this kind of fabrication, and maybe you'll learn something by watching. The request I got this time was to carve someone's family crest out of a piece of wood. This video is a build diary outlining the process I went through to make it. If you guys find this sort of thing interesting, let me know in the comments and I can film some future builds. Okay, so let's get started. The customer provided a vector file of the artwork, so I opened it up in CorelDRAW to do some editing. I was asked to remove the branches from the picture and just leave the eagle, so let's do that. And now I'll draw a circular frame around the object. Okay, that looks good, so let's export this as an EPS file. Next, I'll open up ArtCam Express, which is my CNC CAD software. I'm going to create a new model, the shape and thickness that I want. Now I'll import the graphics I just created and scale them to fit the block. I'll add an extra circle around the piece representing where the tool will cut it out. Now I'll select the eagle graphic and create a V-carving toolpath. I'll run a simulation to make sure everything looks okay. And I think that looks pretty good. Now that I look at it, I notice that the origin is actually in the corner of the block. What I want is it to be in the middle, so I'm going to change that. Now I'm going to create a end mill profile around the entire piece to cut it out. The end mill I have isn't long enough to cut the entire depth of the piece, so I'll cut 20 millimeters and do the rest by hand. So now let's simulate the whole thing so we can see if everything looks okay. Great, everything looks good. The final step is to export the toolpaths and load them up on the CNC machine. Now that the computer work's done, I can actually start making some sawdust. I'm using a thick piece of cherry board for this project, and I'm going to start by cutting it into squares. If you notice, the wood actually has quite a bit of warp to it, so I'm going to use some double-sided carpet tape to stick it down to my CNC machine and mill the top flat. Right now, I'm zeroing the bit to the highest point of the workpiece. I'm going to remove just enough to make it flat. And here's the result, one side nice and flat. Now I can flip the block over and mill the top side. I'm going to mill it down to 45 millimeters, which if you remember is the depth of my model. And the result is a block that is flat and the thickness that I need. Now I'm using a palm sander to remove any tool marks from the top of the piece. I don't want to sand it after it's carved as it might ruin some of the detail in the carving. The cherry wood I'm using for this project is pretty expensive, so before I cut the final piece, I'm going to do a test cut on some foam. Profile looks okay, so now I can test the V-bit carving. The carving actually takes quite a while, so I'm not going to complete the whole thing, just enough to make sure it looks right. And the result looks pretty good, so now I'm confident to try it on the real wood. To start, I'll mark the center of the block. This is X and Y 0 in my program. Next, I'll stick it down with a generous amount of tape. If it moves during the cutting, it will be ruined, so you want to be careful. I'm going to start with the V-bit carving, so I'll remove the end mill and install the 60-degree V-bit. Now I'm moving the bit to the center of the block and zeroing the X, Y, and Z axis. The carving actually takes quite a while, so all I need to do is hang out and make sure nothing goes horribly wrong. Now I'll switch to the end mill to cut the profile. All right, great. The CNC work is done. Now I'll use a bandsaw to remove the majority of the excess material. I'll clean up the rest on the router table. Now I'm using a straight bit with a guide bearing to trim off the rest of the material. Now we just need to clean it up. I'm using a palm sander to sand the tool marks off the edge of the piece. Now I'll just round the edges over a little bit and use a sanding sponge to clean it up. And here we are, ready for finishing. I used a compressor to blow off the majority of the dust, but now I'm going to take some mineral spirits and just wipe the piece down to clean it up and show any horrible tool marks that I may need to sand out. And finally, we're ready to add a finish. I'm going to use some Minwax Satin Wipe-On Poly for this project. Since this project has so many crevices and tight spots, I'm going to use a brush to apply the poly. Now I'll just let it dry and come back later for another coat. And here's the finished project. This was a lot of fun to make, and I hope it will make someone happy. As always, visit notesandbolts.com for more projects and tutorials, and I'll see you next time.